I would like to start by introducing our clinic, founded by Dr. Walter Longo, a leading researcher in nutrition as it relates to aging, cancer, and other age-related diseases. At Create Cures, our team of registered dietitians and biologists work alongside Dr. Longo himself to provide collaborative care for our patients. Our goal is to develop effective, integrative strategies to support condition-specific therapy and to optimize outcomes for those we work with. Before we dive in, a quick note, the information shared here today is for educational purposes only, and it's not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So please always consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding any medical condition. To dive deeper into the science and real-world impact of this work, we encourage everyone to check out Dr. Longo's latest book, Fasting Cancer. This book is available in bookstores and Audible platforms, and the documentary Fasting and the Longevity Revolution, which shares powerful stories of patients, clinicians, and the research that is driving the use of fasting in cancer care. You can view it at the link shown here or in this slide, and feel free to share it with a friend and a loved one as well. My name is Frida Hovik. I'm a registered dietitian here at Create Cures Foundation. I hold a master's degree in nutrition, healthspan, and longevity from the University of Southern California, and I'm currently pursuing my PhD in clinical nutrition, conducting research under Dr. Longo's supervision.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shayna Feinerman. I'm also a registered dietitian with CCF, and I also studied under Dr. Longo while getting my master's in nutrition, healthspan, and longevity at the University of Southern California. And I'm really looking forward to sharing longevity research today and help everybody live to 100.
Just a quick reminder, we do host live webinars every month, so keep an eye out for the next one, which will be on September 17th, where we will be covering brain health and aging. And if you would like to catch up on any past sessions, you can find them all on our YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe so you're notified as soon as a new one comes up. Here is a look at what we will be covering today. We're going to talk about health span versus lifespan, nutrition and metabolic health, fasting, movement and physical activity, sleep and recovery, and stress and mindset and purpose. And as always, we will also talk about some practical tools, how to implement this in our daily lives, and also we'll have a question and answer session at the end. We are looking forward to answer any questions you may have, and we will definitely set aside time at the end to answer any questions. Throughout the presentation, feel free to use the chat box for any questions we will be asking during the talk. And if you have questions about any very specific patient case questions or are interested in working with us, please reach out to us by email, and we're happy to follow up individually. Let's unpack the terms health span versus lifespan. Lifespan is simply the total number of years you are alive. And health span, on the other hand, is the number of those years you spend free of major disease or disability. It's really the quality of life and feeling well, rather than just being alive and maybe don't have a good quality of life. And this matters because modern medicine has been really good at extending lifespan with medicine, but that does not automatically mean that we're extending the years that we're feeling good, both mentally and physically. And often what's happening is that we're extending this number of years someone lives with a chronic disease and not really extending the life but not having a disease. And this is where the term compression of morbidity comes in, and this is a concept from the researcher James Fries. And this is about that the goal is not just about tacking years onto end of the life, but it's compressing this gap between health span and lifespan so we can live a long life, but we also have good health, and it's a shorter window of that decline at the end of the life. And there's one place researchers look for real-world clues about this, and that's what's called the blue zones. And we're going to get into that a little bit later today, but there's a few blue zones such as Sardinia, Okinawa, and Loma Linda that offers a lot of observational population level clues about longevity. for a long time, aging was treated like a fixed countdown clock. That is just something that happens to all of us. But the research over the last couple of decades has really shifted that picture. Aging is shaped by identifiable biological processes and processes that can influence our processes that can potentially actually slow down as well. And one useful way that researchers usually organize this is by the hallmarks of aging framework. And without getting too deep into the biology, there are three pieces that are most relevant to nutrition, and this is cellular senescence. This means that the cells that stop dividing but don't die off, and instead they linger and they stay around and cause low-grade damage. Then we have chronic low-grade inflammation, which is sometimes referred to as inflammaging. Then we have metabolic dysregulation, meaning that the body's ability to handle blood sugar and energy starts to falter. And these three hallmarks are not individually, they really work together, they interact and reinforce one another. And then we have one signaling pathway that comes up again and again in this research, and this is what's called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. This is a hormone involved in growth and cell division, and researchers study how its signaling relates to aging and disease risk over the long run. And this is where Laron syndrome becomes very interesting scientifically. And this is a rare genetic condition where people have very low IGF-1 levels. And studying this population has given researchers a lot of information about what happens metabolically and health-wise when the growth signaling is dialed way down over the course of a lifetime. And it's also part of why IGF-1 shows up in the longevity data very often. So the researcher or Dan Buttner's team identified 5 blue zones around the world by really studying these shared habits of centenarians that are living there. It's important to note that this is mostly observational study and it's not a controlled trial, but I think there's a lot we can learn from what these centenarians do in these different regions around the world. So we have Okinawa in Japan. This is an island where the tradition of strong social network is really important. They also consume a lot of plant-based foods. Then we have Sardinia. People are very active. Again, the community is very important there. A lot of plant-based food, seafood, and very tight family bonds as well. And then we have Costa Rica, which is a very sunny region with a focus on a lot of activity, outdoor life, and also very deep community ties. And then we have a place in Greece, which is a more quiet island where people eat more that traditional Mediterranean diet and they also rest and have a very good quality of life. And then there's a place here in California, Loma Linda, where it's a group of Seventh-day Adventists who live with very healthy habits. They also have a lot of faith and so on. Some of the common denominators in these places, it's that the diet is focusing on a lot of plants, a lot of activity throughout the day, strong networks, they have a purpose, there's faith, and also the family structure is very important to them. So now I want to ask you, what is one thing you will adapt from the habits observed in the blue zones? Maybe it could be having more of the daily activity, community support. I love that. Keep connections strong, family and social connections. Yes, I think the social aspect is very underrated and it's so important for our health and our longevity. Movement throughout the day, consumption of beans and lots of activity. Great, more activity. All good answers. And I'll pass it over to Shayna.
Perfect. Thank you, Frida. And now we're going to dive more into the nutrition and dietary patterns that are really associated with living longer and healthier. So first, I want to bring it on to you and ask everybody, what dietary pattern do you think is associated with improving health span? Maybe there's lots of diets out there, but what do you guys think is most associated with health span? Perfect Mediterranean diet. Yes, we're going to talk about this, talk about a more specific type of Mediterranean diet that is associated with longevity. Amazing. So, minimally processed, plant-forward eating forms the consistent foundation across longevity populations and clinical trials for the diet that's shown to result in a longer health span. So, more specifically, Mediterranean style eating is consistently linked to better cardiometabolic and cognitive outcomes. So, this is because it's focusing on unrefined whole grains, legumes, dark leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and healthy monounsaturated fats. And while nutrition is a fundamental daily lever for cardiometabolic, mitochondrial, and cellular health, it is a very essential core component alongside other pillars of health, which we will discuss today, such as physical activity, sleep, and even psychosocial well-being. So I first want to highlight the pre-DIME study, which was a landmark clinical trial done in Spain. So this involved 7,400 older adults aged 55 to 80, which were at high risk for heart disease. And they had three different groups. Two were Mediterranean diet, but one of those Mediterranean diet added olive oil, one of them added mixed nuts every day, and then the last group was a control low-fat diet advice group. So they had some really interesting key findings in both Mediterranean groups. So both of these groups saw a 30% drop in heart attacks, strokes, and cardiovascular deaths. This proved that dietary changes alone can prevent initial major heart events in high-risk individuals. It even reversed metabolic syndrome criteria in 13.8% of patients and reduced type 2 diabetes risk by 40%. There was also a cognitive protection benefit, so the Mediterranean diet itself was associated with preserved executive function and reduced rate of age-related cognitive decline. So we see consistently that a plant-forward diet helps us live longer and healthier, but what is actually happening in the body when we eat that way? So our body has two modes. We have a building mode where we're stimulating growth, and then a cleanup mode where we repair and we clear out junk in the body. So this is at a cellular level. But high protein and calorie abundance flips that growth mode on. So this is really helpful when we're growing as a youth and we want to grow and grow and grow, but sustained high activation will accelerate cellular aging. On the other hand, nutrient scarcity and fasting periods trigger the repair pathways. So this activates AMPK and autophagy, which helps clear misfolded proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, and damaged organelles. So it's not that growth is bad, repair is good. We need both to be healthy and grow new cells and repair. But it's having that balance. So not too much growth mode, but having a good amount of repair mode as well. So we're going to discuss ways that we can really turn on that repair mode and also die down or keep the growth mode at bay. So we know that keeping protein moderate is actually a key of slowing those growth signals, right? But not all protein is equal. So protein contains amino acids, which are considered the building blocks of these proteins. And when they link together, they help build muscle, they repair tissues, they make hormones, and even support brain function. However, there's certain amino acids like methionine, which is very abundant in red meat, eggs, dairy, and poultry, that can stimulate more of that growth pathway. So it's going to be two ones, mTOR and IGF-1. Whereas plant proteins like legumes have a lower ratio of methionine. And evidence shows actually that when we restrict methionine, that can actually extend lifespan and improve metabolic health. So in humans, we see that predominantly plant protein diets are associated with increased lifespan, which is likely due to these lower levels of methionine. But it's important to know that our protein requirements shift actually after the age of 65, where we should just slightly increase our protein and a little bit more methionine to help prevent sarcopenia, lean muscle loss, and frailty. So in 2026, this year, Dr. Longo's lab published a study in cell metabolism, which is a very great paper, in which plant-forward longevity diets was with a modest amount of methionine in later years prevented frailty, but still raised beneficial longevity markers such as GLP-1, FGF21, and at the same time, even reduced IGF-1. So it's important to understand age and someone's current condition, current protein intake to make that recommendation. This brings us to the longevity diet, which was developed by Dr. Walter Longo, and it's developed based on the Mediterranean diet, but a little bit more targeted for longevity. So it is different from other diets because he's built it on what he calls the 5 pillars of longevity science. So the first one is juventology, which is understanding the foundational biology of youth and cellular aging. And then epidemiology, so large-scale human population data across decades, clinical studies, centenarian studies, so the blue zones, as well as complex systems, so integrating multi-organ physiology, evolutionary biology, and metabolic modeling. So all of this has come together to develop this longevity diet, and I'm going to share a few core aspects. So one, when we're talking about protein, it's kept low to moderate in midlife, and in order to downregulate chronic mTOR and IGF-1 activation, adjusting up at 65 years old to protect against sarcopenia. The protein is sourced primarily from plants, supplemented by low mercury fish 2 to 3 times per week, and minimal eggs or dairy. Then, instead of refined carbohydrates, we have complex carbs and unrefined whole grains, and then a really abundant amount of healthy plant fats such as olive oil, nuts, seeds, and a little bit of dark chocolate. So conversely, the diet minimizes foods that trigger systemic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction, such as red meat, processed meats, added sugar, and refined carbs. And then finally, aiming for a 12-hour overnight fast or time-restricted eating to give the body a break and trigger repair pathways nightly, which we'll dive a little bit more into. So, quick question. At what age do protein requirements increase to protect muscle mass? Perfect, 65. Got it. Awesome. Great. So while that 12 to 13 hour overnight time restricted eating window is a great baseline for metabolic health, periodic longer fasting can trigger deeper cellular repair mechanisms, so specifically stem cell activation and autophagy. So let's take a look at how Dr. Longo translated these prolonged fasting benefits into clinical practice using the fasting mimicking diet. But of course, we first need to define what is fasting. And fasting is voluntary abstinence from all or some kinds of food or drink. Specifically, it's switching from burning glucose for energy to burning fatty acids and some ketone bodies. Benefits include cellular repair, lowering inflammation, and protecting against oxidative stress. So fasting is an extreme stress on the body, and that stress triggers stress response pathways to induce a survival mode in the body, which is similar but to a greater extent than exercise stress or being cold. So, like the longevity diet, fasting also targets the IGF-1 growth pathway. When we see in mutant mice with a disruption of IGF-1, they live longer, and also like the Lebrun's Frida mentioned. So fasting and calorie restriction can turn down that IGF-1 pathway too. Then we have TOR, mTOR. This is a master regulator of our metabolism. So fasting leads to downregulation of this pathway, which actually helps increase that autophagy, which is cellular cleanout, increase stress resistance, and altered metabolism. And then finally, PKA pathway. This is a key gene that needs to be shut down in order for the body to get into a regenerative mode. So fasting induces that level. So all of this results in cellular protection, increased activation of stress resistance pathways, and the removal of damaged cells and a reduction of inflammation. So when talking about fasting and dietary restriction in humans, A clinical benchmark we all point to is the calorie trial, and this stands for Comprehensive Assessment of Long-Term Effects of Reducing Intake of Energy. So while rodent models give us a good mechanism of what's going on with calorie restriction or fasting, this trial was a really great reference point to understand what happens in humans. So it was a landmark trial, 2 years in a randomized control trial that evaluated 220 non-obese healthy adults who they ended up restricting their calories by 12% over 2 years. So the goal was to restrict it by 25, but that was very hard to do, but they were able to, on average, restrict by 12%. So the effects of this restriction was 10% weight loss coming from mostly fat and also lowering systemic inflammation very significantly, lowering LDL cholesterol and insulin resistance. So because, like I mentioned, the calorie trial was very difficult for patients to achieve and sustain caloric restriction on a daily 2-year basis, there are other ways to achieve similar benefits through fasting or even daily fasting approaches. So I want to define the different types of fasting. So many of us have heard the term intermittent fasting. But even under that umbrella, there's different types of fasting. So, in general, intermittent fasting would mean that it's less than 24 hours fasting. This could either be alternate day fasting or even time restricted eating. So, in the longevity diet, like I mentioned, we recommend a 12 to 13-hour overnight fast because it seems to be very beneficial to have breakfast for your cardiometabolic health. Then there's also prolonged fasting, which is defined of any fasting over 2 days. So this could be a water fast. However, this poses great risks such as dehydration, gallstones, low blood pressure, low blood sugar, nutrient deficiencies, and very low compliance, loss of muscle mass, and even more. So in order to counteract some of those risks and still get the benefits of fasting, we can do what's called a fasting mimicking diet, which is a 4 to 5 day specific plant-based diet that can achieve the same effects caused by fasting with less risk. So it is able to protect our healthy cells, which we call turning on differential stress resistance, and even sensitize abnormal cells in the way of cancer through differential stress sensitization. And of course, any type of fasting, especially fasting mimicking diet or any prolonged fasting, should require doctor's approval, and not everybody is a great contestant. So definitely talk to your doctor and talk to a dietitian. And I want to go over a few of the studies in the fasting mimicking diet space that have really defined the longevity aspect of it. So first, a 2015 study where in humans there were 3 monthly cycles that lowered IGF-1 significantly, lowered glucose, body weight, trunk fat, and C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker. And there's very mild side effects. And then the next study done in 2017 was 100 healthy adults who did 3 monthly 5-day FMDs. They also reduced body weight, trunk and total body fat, blood pressure, and IGF-1 compared to a normal diet. And then in 2024, we have 3 FMD cycles, which were able to lower insulin resistance, reduce liver fat, which is an interesting finding, and produce a younger immune profile, and even show a drop in biological age by 2.5 years. And then finally, this study in 2023, which is 4 monthly cycles versus 4 months of the Mediterranean diet. So we wanted to see what the comparisons were on different biomarkers. And we found that there were similar improvements in the weight, waist, body fat, cholesterol, and cardio risk scores. But FMD was able to lower A1C and IGF-1 and actually preserve lean muscle mass compared to the Mediterranean diet. So overall, FMD, overnight fasting, and longevity diet, these are all very important levers that can influence longevity and reduce factors associated with accelerated aging. But diet is just one pillar, so there's many others tied to how we age, and I'll hand it to Frida to walk us through a few others.
Thank you, Shayna. Yeah, let's dive into movement and physical activity. So we're shifting gears from what's on the plate or not on the plate in terms of fasting to what the body's doing day to day because movement is just as much as a longevity pillar as nutrition. And the first piece we'll talk about is resistance training. So, the International Conference on Frailty and Sarcopenia research guidelines reflect an international consensus that resistance training should be the first line intervention for sarcopenia. And as we age, we naturally lose muscle mass and strength, and this is the process called sarcopenia, and it's one of the biggest drivers of functional decline later in life. And muscle is not just about looking strong, it's really about how we are functional, what lets someone carry the groceries, get up from a chair, or even catch themselves if they fall down. So resistance training is not really optional as we age. It's one of the more protective things that we can really do to stay independent and functional. Then we have cardiorespiratory fitness, usually measured as VO2 max, essentially how efficiently your body can take in and use oxygen during exercise. And there was an article published in JAMA Network back in 2018 that followed 122,000 patients that were undergoing treadmill testing for about 8 years. And this elite cardiorespiratory fitness group was associated with an 80% lower risk of all-cause mortality compared to low fitness. And the authors explicitly noted that there were no upper limit of benefit. So I think this article really reflects the benefits of the cardiorespiratory fitness. And this is really one of the strongest predictors we see in the space of longevity or in terms of the exercise data. And it's as important as all the other biomarkers that is very easy to obsess over, clinically speaking. And for people who are wondering about how to actually implement this in their life and how to build fitness without overtraining, we usually refer to zone 2 training. That is a very helpful practical framework. And this means training at a pace where you're working out, you get your heart rate up, but you can still hold a conversation. So it builds an aerobic base and it's sustainable in a way that it's not like doing a sprint or super constant high intensity work. It's more sustainable long term and something that most people can implement. And movement is not also just about muscles and cardiovascular fitness, it's also about our metabolic health. Regular movement improves insulin sensitivity and it supports mitochondrial function, meaning that our cells become more efficient at producing and using energy. So all these factors together, muscle, cardio fitness, and metabolism, these are all really pointing at the same underlying goal, which is to have a body that is staying resilient and also functional longer as we age. And of all the pillars we're covering today, I would say sleep is probably the one that gets least attention clinically. And although we have a lot of evidence for how important it is, it's not as popular and as people don't talk about it as much as nutrition and exercise. Although things are shifting, there's becoming more and more focus on sleep and recovery now as well. But both the duration and the quality of sleep are linked to cognitive outcomes, things like memory and processing speed, and also metabolic outcomes. So if we think about blood sugar regulation and appetite hormones, these things are being influenced about the quality of our sleep as well. And if someone is optimizing their diet, maybe they're training super hard, but then they're sleeping 4 hours a night, then they're still leaving a lot on the table. And one of the more fascinating concepts when we talk about sleep is what's called the glymphatic clearance. So this is essentially a waste clearance system in the brain that ramps up during sleep, and it's flushing out metabolic byproducts that are accumulating while we are awake. And most of this evidence comes from animal models, but the human research is still emerging and evolving as well. Sleep also has a bi-directional relationship with stress. So poor sleep raises stress hormones in our body. It can impair glucose regulation, and chronic stress in turn makes it also harder than to fall asleep and stay asleep. So this is a loop that can go in both directions. On the practical side, the sleep hygiene's basics are great recommendations. So you want to have it consistently in your sleep and wake times, getting natural light exposure, especially in the morning, avoiding caffeine after a certain time of the day. You also want to have a kind of a wind down routine before bed so your body gets a signal that now it's time to shift into a rest mode. Then I will pass it back to Shayna.
Thank you, Frida. And we're going to go into some information about stress. So, stress is the body's physiological and psychological response to internal and external stressors. So, some stress is necessary, which helps us adapt and survive, but chronic stress creates physical wear and tear on the body, which actually can elevate cortisol, impair insulin sensitivity, and raise inflammatory markers. So, good news is that there's really great evidence that actively managing stress can support longevity. So, for example, in one of the blue zones in Okinawa, there's a concept called ikigai, which is a strong sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. So, it could be gardening, working, caring for someone else, playing chess. It's just anything that provides meaning and joy. Social connection, which is also a really big theme with the blue zones, is another strong predictor of longer, healthier life. So it's definitely worth consistently working to protect your peace and manage stress, whether that's finding your ikigai, practicing meditation, starting a hobby, or whatever can support your mood. And now we're going to go into some of the practical tools we can take and some strategies and takeaways from today. So we've gone over a lot of science today, but how can we really put that into practice? So at CCF, Frida and I help turn the research into real daily habits and really personalized to the patient. So it's very important to understand that there's not a single longevity diet that works for everyone. I'm already seeing questions in the chat of, I have this condition, what should I do? I can't eat this food. So the right plan and longevity picture depends on the single person. So we've looked at overview, what are the dietary patterns associated with longevity, but everyone is different. So before we make recommendations, we really need to look at the whole picture, biomarkers, age, life stage, activity level, and even your own specific goals. So second, really important to understand that it's the small changes that really beat dramatic overhauls in making sustainable outcomes. So a lot of people read about longevity, they try to change everything at once. Maybe they go fully plant-based, start a 16-hour fast, and track every calorie, but that usually can lead to burnout in a couple of weeks. So instead, we recommend a lot of habit stacking. So attaching one new habit to something that you're already doing. So, for example, this could be if you like making a morning coffee, then drink a glass of water while it brews. Or if you're having leftovers, add a serving of greens to add more leafy greens in your diet. So these are small changes that really add up over time and can even change a lot of biomarkers and longevity in general. So third, the wellness space is very overwhelming. So there's a lot of conflicting information online. And here at CCF, we use evidence-based research to help keep your plan safe, prevent nutrient gaps, and adjust your life as your labs change. So again, like Frida was talking about, one of our biggest takeaways from today is that we want to add years, not just add years to your life, but add vibrant, disease-free years to your life to your years. So it's thinking about that health span rather than just your lifespan. And nutrition is just one daily pillar, but it's a very important one. So diet is so important, but it works together with all the other pillars we talked about today, such as sleep, stress management, and purpose. So it's really this whole lifestyle approach. And then it's very important to personalize, as we've been saying. So using your own biomarkers, genetics, and goals to tailor a strategy that fits your own unique biology. So these are, again, small sustainable habits that are really consistent, even 1% improvements that over time can really add up and make such an impact. With that, I'll pass it back to Frida.
Right, great. Thank you, Shayna. So, the longevity diet, which Shayna was talking about earlier, it really sums up all these different pillars. So, it includes a diet that emphasizes complex carbohydrates, low mercury, fish. We like to use the acronym SMASH, which stands for salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. These are fish that are very high in omega-3, but also very low in mercury. We like to focus on plant proteins, healthy fats, a lot of vegetables, colorful fruits and vegetables, and it minimizes this processed animal products, minimizes added sugars and refined carbohydrates. And then we also like to focus on like a personalized meal timing. So that could look like 12-hour or 14-hour overnight fast or a periodic fasting window based on the individual's goals. And then, of course, we encourage regular exercise and strength training as well. And in our clinic, we usually start with these basic principles, but then we adapt them to each person's unique needs, again, based on where they are in life, if they have any conditions, the age, activity levels, all these different personal factors. All right, so now we're gonna have a few quiz questions. So, what is health span versus lifespan? We discussed the different definitions. Are those the same things, or quality versus quantity, living disease from years versus actual years? Exactly. Yeah, I like to focus on like health span is the quality of life, and then lifespan is the amount of years somebody is alive. Yeah, good question, good answers. And then our next question is, what is one risk of doing prolonged water-only fast that is minimized by doing a fasting mimicking diet? Gallstones, low blood pressure, muscle loss, dehydration, exactly, muscle loss. So there's definitely some potential side effects of doing a prolonged fast, especially if it's not being medically supervised, which we always recommend. And then a very important like action item. So we want everybody to take away at least something they can implement in their lives. So what is one lifestyle change you will make after tonight's webinar? More activity, great. More community involvement, 12 to 13 hours time restricted eating window, more vegetables. I love that. Yeah, so we encourage everybody to think of something that they can definitely incorporate. And again, like Shayna was mentioning, I don't advise to incorporate like a lot of different things at once. You want to do that habit stacking to make it sustainable and realistic. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and look out also for our next webinars. And also please look out for a survey that will be emailed to you. And now we're going to have time for some questions. Let's see. So there's one question about what is the daily protein need under 65? So again, I don't like to give a general answer just because it depends so much on the activity level and on the current body weight. If somebody has like sarcopenia, for example, we would recommend a higher level versus if somebody um, are very healthy and their activity level is pretty normal. But as a general rule, it's between like zero point 0.8 gram to 1 gram per kilograms. But again, this is very personalized. It can look different from yeah, person to person.
Totally. And I saw another question about with the protein, then what about fat and carbs? And again, that is very personalized and depending on your activity level, we might recommend certain things. But generally, I would say for the longevity diet, it would be around 45 to 50% carbohydrates, and then that protein recommendation, and then the rest would be healthy fats.
And then somebody asked, when somebody already has cancer, how might the longevity diet help, especially if their current diet is very much so a Mediterranean diet? I would say a lot of our patients are definitely like super knowledgeable and they already like eat pretty healthy, but sometimes I think it's just having that person, a professional who can maybe do a few tweaks, maybe make things like taking it to the next level. So that's why we always work with our patient where they are at. So it could be somebody who have very little to no knowledge versus somebody who has all the knowledge in the world, but we always meet our patients where they are, and then even we can do like a few tweaks or dive into something more like supplements, for example, could be something we would look into if they're already doing everything really well. So yeah, I would say there's always benefits of working with Create Cures.
Yeah, and also to add on, looking at your biomarkers, so especially for someone with cancer, looking at IGF-1, A1C, insulin, certain metabolic markers as well, so tailoring that to best support those growth pathways and reducing the cancer pathway too.
Exactly. And then there's a question about tuna. So tuna is a good source of protein. However, tuna tends to be a little bit high in mercury. So our recommendation would be number one, if somebody has a history of like high heavy metals in their blood test, then for sure we don't recommend tuna. If somebody don't have that history, once every 2 weeks or so is okay. But again, I'm all about like individual recommendations based on their individual factors.
Frida, do you have a recommendation? Someone asked about balancing the zone 2 exercise and then high intensity workouts.
Yes, I would say, first of all, I love exercising. I love high intensity exercise. So I would say if somebody's up for that, that definitely has a lot of benefits. But I also, again, going back to that sustainable habit stacking, we don't want to set too high goals either. So that's why I think whatever you're comfortable with or you feel is achievable. But I think it's good to have some higher intensity also if you can, because it's really good to get that heart rate up more than just the conversational pace. But zone two is like a good average goal for most people, I would say.
Good base, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw a few questions about supplements like calcium, vitamin D, K2, and even creatine. And again, I would say this should be very much individualized. And if anyone is interested for us to do a whole webinar on different supplements, what the current research is showing for longevity, we'd be happy to dive into that as well. But again, it's looking at the nutrient gaps that someone has, supplementing with that, and of course, relying on a whole food, plant forward diet to meet most of your nutrient needs.
Yeah, good answer. And then should we wait until after we're done fa with fasting to exercise, or is it okay to exercise while fasting? So we definitely recommend not to go too crazy on the exercise during a fast because it's already gonna be low to zero amount of calories. So if you're in addition burning a lot of calories, now it's gonna you now you're gonna be more hungry and maybe you'll be hypoglycemic if you're working out hard. So a little bit of like super light resistance training can be okay just to stimulate still some muscle growth with the muscles, but I wouldn't focus too much on the exercise during a fast. And then I see a question regarding sleep, how to increase lymphatic circulation. I would say it's really about getting into that REM stage of sleep and deep sleep. That's where a lot of the cleanup is happening. So how to do this, really going back to the sleep hygiene. So limiting caffeine, if you have a lot of stress in your life, finding out some tools or some ways to deal with it so you're not thinking about it too late. Dark room, cold room, some of those. Yeah, those are some tips.
Great. Someone also asked, what does the SMASH fish include? And if anyone doesn't know, SMASH is an acronym for the fish that are lowest in mercury but also highest in omega-3s. And it stands for salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardine, and herring. And yes, like unlike the tuna is a little bit higher in mercury, these ones are much lower and they give really great sources of omega-3s.
Yep. And somebody asked if this video will be available, and yes, it will be posted on our YouTube channel.
Mhm.
Does the longevity diet allow for fermented foods like sauerkraut or kimchi? Yes, absolutely. Those have great pre and probiotics, so very good for gut health. So I don't know if it explicitly mentioned those food in the longevity diet book, but that's definitely something we will um, can include in the longevity diet.
Hmm. Someone asked, what are a couple powerhouse fruits or veggies that we should try to incorporate daily? This is a really great question, Frida. I'm curious to hear what you would add on. I would definitely say dark leafy greens, which are amazing, cruciferous vegetables, which are very anti-cancer. Beans are amazing, great source of fiber and soluble fiber. And then fruits, definitely berries, these high in antioxidant ones, so pomegranates, cherries, things like that. What would you add, Frida?
Yeah, very similar to you. I have to say, I always think of like the fruit or vegetables or berry with the strongest color is usually gonna
Hmm.
have most nutrients. So definitely berry is a big fan also because they're low in sugar, very high in antioxidant, also fiber, among other benefits. And then for vegetables, definitely the green ones, so like spinach, broccoli, green beans. And then sweet potato too, that's more it's a vegetable, but it's also more carbohydrate or higher in carbs. But it's still sweet potatoes is a big fan of mine.
Especially the purple sweet potatoes.
Oh yeah, those are good.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and somebody asked if we have a podcast, and this is actually something we discussed today. It may be happening soon, so stay tuned. See if there's any other questions. And again, you guys can always email us if there's any very like personalized questions that you have. And then somebody asked about creatine supplements, uh, D vitamin 3 and K2 and omega-3 fish oil. Yes, those are three supplements that we recommend for a lot of people. There are some we don't recommend it if you have any issues with your kidney. We don't recommend creatine because it can be harsh for the kidney to filter, but that could be great to support muscle mass and longevity. And somebody asked about coconut oil. That's a good oil. We always recommend olive oil too. If you're cooking, maybe the coconut oil or even avocado oil has a higher smoke point, so that would be a recommendation as well.
Hmm. Also, if you have a maybe higher cholesterol, coconut oil could be a saturated fat, so
Yeah.
reducing that. Good.
All right. Any more questions, Shayna?
I think we've done a lot. Let's see. I saw one about weighted vests, and I think that is a good way to increase your heart rate and add more of that high intensity even on just a daily walk. So I think Frida would echo that as well.
Yeah, I feel like it can increase the efficiency. Like, let's say you only have like 20 minutes to do a quick workout. If you put the weighted vest on, then it can be more efficient than double the time and still work out. So, yeah.
Hmm. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending tonight's webinar. And please reach out to us and check out our upcoming webinars as well that will be coming up soon.